And welcome back to Jeff Koinange live at the Intercontinental Hotel. What a debate we're having, and I keep saying these words. We have to keep talking. We have to keep questioning. We have to call it like we see it. And when Dr. PLO, Lumumba, and Barrack Muluka show up, you know they are the best political tag team on TV talking about the issues that matter. Gentlemen, before we talk about the way forward, I have to mention, we have to talk a little bit about mumas, which is an amazingly functioning company, and then all of a sudden, it imploded, if you will. We're hearing numbers of up to 3 billion. Could be more. PLO, what is wrong with this picture? Now, mumias is no longer, right? There's no more mumias. It's shut down. And the government wants to revive it for another billion?
Absolutely. For another 5 billion. You know, I've always said that if you are a good manager, you are not successful until your successor succeeds. That is the way it is. If you leave and the institution that you presided over collapses, it means that it was built on quicksand. And the tragedy of mumias is that we have families in the millions who are suffering. And what is annoying and amazing at once is that the individuals whose names are being mentioned are treating it very casually. And yet these individuals whose names we cannot mention for legal reasons here, but who know themselves, are some of the wealthiest people in this country. So if you are to ask and to trace this money, you'd possibly discover that the wealth of mumias has been transferred to individual pockets. And what one expects and what I desire to see is that mumias will be a test case not only of successful prosecution, but successful recovery of the monies that have been migrated from the company to individual pockets. And that must happen. And I'm very happy with one individual called Washiali, who I think is the member of parliament in that area. I hope that he does not succumb to the forces that are being arrayed against him, that he stands out and insists that if there is no public prosecution, he mounts private prosecution and seeks to recover the wealth of these individuals who have destroyed families and have destroyed an institution and a company that was one which would have helped this country in many ways.
Barrack, Agriculture Committee was alleged to have been paid more than 100 million shillings to doctor reports about mumias.
First, they are supposed to have discussed or tabled before Parliament their reports about 3 weeks ago. The whole country was looking forward to that with anticipation. We don't know what went wrong. Suddenly we started hearing of 4 million. It shot up to 60 million. It shot up to 100 million. And yesterday we saw some very nasty exchanges. And the exchanges were not that you ate. The exchanges were that you did not bring our portion. I think barring somebody like Washiali, everybody else was up in arms basically to say that they did not get their portion of the bribe money. Yeah. So I think these are very serious things. And as I've said before, I think the whole institution of Parliament, as it sits today and as it is constituted, is rotten. And it's supposed to be the watchdog. It has become the lapdog in the hands of certain individuals, as he correctly says. A whole sub-economy rests upon mumias. There's a school system that rests upon that economy. If you go to mumias today, there's the Buka Academy. It's possibly going to close down, or maybe it's going to be sold to some individual. And even this rescue thing that we are talking about, I'm not so sure that we are not going to get to a point where somebody is going to say, no, let us sell it to private investors. And I'm not so sure that even part of this looting has not been deliberately calculated to lead to that kind of way out, that you emasculate the organization completely, and then you go on to sell it to throw away to some individuals. So I agree with the PLO that here is what needs to be a test case. And I think mumias, when it eventually unravels, is going to be a true Pandora box, that you're going to find lots of politicians from the past and the present embroiled in that thing. We may want to ask the question, why are all those usually very loud politicians, especially from Western province so strategically quiet about mumias? What is it that the mouths, which have usually been very loud, are doing? Our people say that an eating mouth cannot also be a speaking mouth. Is it possible that they have eaten? What has happened?
Tragedy. It's tragic in the end.
Tragic.
And you wonder why the makers of Range Rover love Kenya so much, right?
They know this is the home of ill-gotten wealth, where the only thing that they can use to sate their insatiable hunger is to get trophies of that nature.
The solution, gentlemen, the solution going forward. Do we need that big arrest? Do we need that public figure to be reined in front of the public, to be embarrassed, to be shown, to be dragged in front of the public for people to finally realize? What do we need, PLO?
What I always said, that the biggest and the most effective civic education will be the day that a person is charged in the morning and the magistrate says, we are prepared to hear this case for the next 2 weeks until conclusion and evidence is adduced, and the individual is sent to jail for 10 years, barred from holding office for 10 years, his wealth is forfeited. Then a lesson will have been sent that you don't do it here, and if you do it here, you suffer and we hit you where it hurts most. That is one of the things that I hope will happen. But if it doesn't happen, as I see it being dealt with velvet gloves, then this is just another tea party for them.
It's going to be a tea party for the time being, because it's a cancer. It's everywhere. It's going to lead us to a situation where we have got a flawed investigative processes. We're going to end up with a flawed prosecutorial process, so that even if you had the most determined magistrate or judge or judiciary, which is saying, as PLO observes, that we're going to listen to this case for the next 15 days and determine it, what are you going to do as a magistrate or as the judge sitting there when the prosecutorial process is already flawed? And it's flawed deliberately because the prosecutors have eaten, the police have eaten. It's an exercise in futility. I keep saying that this country is going beyond the stage where we can look forward to an evolutionary change. We have got a constitution, a very good revolutionary constitution. What good has it done us? He's talking about devolution of corruption to the branches, to the counties. It is true, it is there. He's talking about people within the religious fraternity. It is true, it is there. So when you get to this point where Parliament has failed you, the Constitution with all the other laws which are the children of that Constitution have failed you, that you look at the institutions that are supposed to be dealing with anti-corruption, they have failed you. What is left?
A poll was done by 6-year-olds.
Deus ex machina.
6-year-olds were asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? 90% of them said, we want to be politicians. This is what they're seeing.
Gravy train.
Yeah.
This is what they're seeing.
Gravy train.
Completely. One of my favorite lines in a movie called Black Hawk Down, when the helicopters were hit in Somalia, 2 helicopters were shot down, and the American commander turns to the pilots and he says, we've lost the initiative. We've lost the initiative.
We cannot afford that luxury, Jeff, because this is a nation that we hold in trust for this generation and generations yet to be born. Once again, I believe that the forces of good are there, but they cannot be heard even in their purest tones. I know they are losing heart, but I believe that is darkest before dawn. I believe that we can seize the initiative, the writings of Barrack, Muluka, the program that you are mounting, the voices that we can continue to raise. I believe that there are those who have not and will not bow to Baal. We must continue speaking what we must do now, and I want to use this occasion and the occasion that you have, let us all use them to tell President Kenyatta, this is your watch. You have recognized that corruption is a cancer in the national body politic. You have issued Executive Order number 6. Let it be the defining document, like the Monroe Doctrine in the United States. Let it be said that Executive Order number 6 is the order that liberated this country from the chains of corruption and sorrow and want. And let him jettison the individuals who are muddying the waters. And I believe that the bulk of the people of Kenya are victims of corruption, and when the chains and the shackles of corruption are removed, they'll follow the right direction. I believe they are capable of being liberated. Because if we lost hope, do we surrender? We cannot afford the luxury of losing hope. We cannot afford.
Absolutely. And Barrack, those of us who write, those of us who broadcast, those of us on the front line of telling this story, should we be doing more?
Indeed, we need really to be doing more. We have failed. I wrote last Saturday that we journalists are also failing. We are failing our country. We are failing our profession. These things which we've been talking about here, the statistics, the figures that we are talking about here, they're not hidden in some place where I have been snooping and finding them. They are documents that were tabled on the floor of Parliament in this month of March in the year 2015, and they have been adopted by Parliament. Why is it that we are not mainstreaming them in the national conversation? Do we seem also to be complicit in these things? Does someone seem to have compromised us so that as parliamentary reporters, as parliamentary writers, as editors, we put them on the side and focus on the squirrel? It is important to focus on the squirrel, but it's also true that the gazelle is bolting and it's going away. Why aren't we mainstreaming this conversation? Why aren't we saying when President Kenyatta issues Executive Order number 6 of March 2015 that let it start with that person who was given that contract in State House and who has been paid money for things that he never did, that there is that officer in Harambee House who has been transferred to the Ministry of Industrialization, but who with all the impunity in the world has said never, I'm not going to move. Who is protecting him?
Who says you can't touch me?
You cannot touch me, I'm untouchable. Let it go to Eastgate and let us find out who this vendor, who is very well known, who received 1.5 billion, and the person who has pocketed 2.89 billion. Let us target those things. But they are going to be targeted only to the extent that we in the Fourth Estate outrate adequately to keep the trains focused on these iniquities, and to the extent that we are not going to accept to be diverted to non-conversations, because this is where the conversation must be.
And this is the moment, PLO.
And Jeff, I can't agree with my good friend Mo. One of the things that the newspapers can do is to dedicate page 3 as a lest we forget page, so that all these things that are being talked about remain permanent until they are resolved. And I believe this is the moment. This is the moment. It is out of the womb of a crisis of this nature that a nation can have a birth which will be a revival. And I believe that what is happening in Parliament could have a silver lining to it. If the reports come out, and I hold the view that an extra parliamentary institution should have undertaken the investigations and brings forth a report, then we can begin to re-examine this institution. And I believe this is the moment, and I believe that if we lose this moment and lose this momentum, then we'll go into the next election, which will be one of the most corruptly conducted elections ever in the history of this country, and this country will never realize our potential. This is the moment. Darkness at noon, let us remove the darkness by action.
Before 1 p.m.
Yes, indeed.
We have a few minutes before we end this program, gentlemen. Let's have some closing thoughts, a way forward. Barrack, you first.
You see, we've had this story of corruption for very many years in this country. I started hearing about corruption in the 1970s when I was a little boy in primary school. I heard about something called karafu. In fact, the idiom, the euphemism for corruption in those years used to be Karafu, because something happened at the coast in the Cloves factory, and nothing happened. We heard about coffee stealing and coffee smuggling from Uganda. Nothing happened except for Jesse Gashago and Godfrey Muhuri Mushiri, who were jailed for political reasons, masquerading under the guise of fighting corruption. And then there was, of course, the man who was called Shamala, Zachariah Shimechero, Buhala Shimechero, who was in charge of the medical stores in the 1970s. I was a little boy in primary school and in high school. And I think Shimechero was the only case of an individual who was jailed for corruption. And again, that was because somebody was interested in his position at the central medical stores in industrial area. I think we must get to a point where the person at the very top, and I really empathize with the president, it's not an easy task. Shakespeare himself said that sleepless is the head that wears the crown. And so he will be sleepless, but let him not lose his sleep for no good cause. Let him lose his sleep for good cause, for which Kenyans will remember that under the watch of one President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, the country reached a turning point where the history turned.
Well put, well put. PLO, last word.
Great leaders are made out of crisis. We have a crisis of integrity. We have a crisis that threatens the well-being of this nation. President Kenyatta has recognized it. History is beckoning him and telling him, come, come, my son. Seize this opportunity. Do something that your country and your people, your generation and generations yet to be born will remember you for. Deal firmly with the perpetrators of the corruption. Deal firmly with those people who are spoiling your parade, and deal with them in a manner that will liberate the people of Kenya from the chains of corruption. This is the moment, and I believe that the president is at the very head of this, and we must follow, because we must not only blame the windmill, we must blame the wind. We are the wind, the president is the windmill. We must give him the courage, and I believe that it can be done and it must be done, because if it is not done, we are done.
We are done, no doubt, and no doubt the inmates will have taken over the asylum.
Indeed, and if they do,
woe betide.
Woe betide us. Our goose will have been cooked.
Goose will have been cooked.
Indeed.
And eaten.
Go forth, go eat.
Go eat.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate it. It's good to have the best political tag team, no doubt, on TV, calling it like they see it and giving some very, very hard lessons, hard advice for those who lead us. It's the best we can do from here, and also do our best to keep calling it each and every day. Don't get tired of calling the corrupt ones. Eventually, somebody will listen. Eventually. We hope. What a team. What a duo. What a political tag team it is indeed. Tomorrow night, right here on the bench, we have Habida Maloney, the superstar songstress, who has a new mission. It's called Superwoman. Make sure you catch that right here on Kenya's television network, KTN. Thanks so much for joining us. Good night. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Rock with 2 R's.